What's up, guys? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Nathan. Bert. This is one of my cats. Yeah. Anyway, so this was something that was requested on a Facebook group. A couple guys were talking about, differences between trilogies and standard cockers and stuff like that. And I figured that's something that we'd talk about tonight. Now, trilogies, we all know trilogies, and a lot of them get kind of a bad rap. A lot of people, they are cheaper cockers. The Trilogy series was the cheapest series of cockers that was ever put out by WGP. If I remember correctly, that was in 2006. I don't remember when it was. But anyway, the Trilogy series autocockers were WGP's attempt at making essentially an idiot-proof autococker, which to a point they did. If they were one of those guns that you don't mess with them, you just pull them out and you shoot them. But wanted to take a quick look at what are some of the differences between a Trilogy and a standard autococker. So we've done some videos already on what all is involved in a standard autococker, both 2K and pre-2K spec. Everything pretty much has the same parts with a couple of slight differences here and there. But we know, you have certain points of adjustment. You have certain things that you have to do to time stuff. There's a couple things that are definitely different with a Trilogy autococker. So first off, the Trilogy, like I said, it was a Trilogy series. There were several different ones that were made. There was the Trilogy Sport, which was the lowest end. I think brand new they retailed at like 100 or 150 bucks. There was the Trilogy Comp, or the Trilogy Competition model, that came with a couple different parts. There was the Tactical Trilogy, which had a tactical looking body to it. It also came with a shroud for the front pneumatics that had, Picatinny rails on it and whatnot. And then there was the Select Fire Trilogy, which I believe was also offered. People may have just swapped frames around. I'm no expert on them, but that's the basis rundown of the different trilogies in the series. So what we're going to be looking at tonight is going to be this one here. Okay, this is what we would call a Trilogy Sport. Okay, so this was the lowest end of the Trilogy series, and they're everywhere. You can pick them up pretty cheap, but they're super solid markers. Like I said, these are ones that you set them, you pick them up, you go out and shoot the living crap out of them, and that's all there is to it. But a couple things that we want to look at as far as what are the differences here and what are some similarities. One thing first that you'll notice is this frame. This was a frame that was specific to the Trilogy series. This is what they call a Trilogy 1.5 frame, basically. It's not quite a single trigger. It's not quite a double trigger. It does take, what the hell you think you're doing? It does take the same mounting bolts as, say, a 2K WGP double hinge frame. But this was the only series to ever get this funky little frame. Another thing that you'll notice, there is no front block. Everything is molded directly into the body. There is no banjo bolt. Where our banjo would normally be, we actually have the LPR. Okay? I told you stay off the damn workbench. What are you doing? You also notice, since we have no front block, I've stolen the ram off this one, but our ram mount loop is actually molded into the body. Same thing, our BASA is molded into the body. But a couple little things here that are definitely different. You'll notice the timing rod here, which this is a stock Trilogy timing rod, is one piece. There is no adjustment collar whatsoever, which means that the portion of timing that a lot of people think about, or the adjustment at the three-way, was that we think about with 2K cockers or standard body cockers anyway, was not something that you did with Trilogies, because you have a single piece non-adjustable timing rod. So where your recocking point comes in the trigger pull was set. There was no messing with it. Now there is a company out there called Tect or Tec-T that made these, which is an adjustable timing rod for a Trilogy autococker. So these are really neat. I don't know if they're manufacturing them anymore. They're getting a little harder to find here and there. If they're still manufacturing them, worth picking up. It's a really cool little addition. They're like 20 bucks. Definitely a really cool addition to any Trilogy autococker. Gives you the ability to adjust where your recocking point is in your trigger pull. Now, another thing that you will notice in particular on this one is this funky looking grip up front. This is a gas-through grip. Okay, so this is just an empty chamber, basically a volumizer really, that would take straight tank pressure and put it right into the valve chamber. And for that reason, now this was standard equipment on a Trilogy Sport model. The Trilogy Comp, Trilogy Tactical, and Trilogy Select fires all had a regulator, if I remember correctly. And not coincidentally, but going along with that, different springing internally, and that's something we'll look at here in just a second. So what that means is the Trilogy comps, for example, were made to run on straight tank pressure or unregulated CO2. So these things will run up into the 800-900 psi input range, which is pretty damn high considering most standard 2K spec autocockers, for example, on stock springs, you can run at 350 psi. So when people talk about low pressure, it's all relative, really. So we talked about how we have our LPR mounted up here. These LPRs are almost exactly like the WGP sledgehammer LPRs, both internally in design as well as the fact that they are adjustable, just not externally. Common misconception on both the sledgehammer LPRs and the Trilogy LPRs, they are still adjustable. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. You can still do a little bit of tuning when it comes to the timing aspects of this. Same thing, you have a standard lower tube basically from the valve back. All Trilogies use an 11/16 valve, so that's going to be the valve that doesn't have a valve lock nut in front of it, just the valve grub screw that sets it in place, as well as a standard style hammer, standard WGP style hammer. So you still have some lug adjustment. You still have to have your back box set. You can make most of your timing adjustments. You just can't do the actual timing at the three-way with a stock Trilogy. They also normally take a 2K spec bolt. This one back here is 2K spec, standard cocking rod, whole 9 yards, nothing special there. So, one thing we want to take a look at real quick, if we take this LPR and unscrew it from the front, this is one of the few proprietary parts to the Trilogy series. This is our valve spring, which is massive. Especially in comparison to any other valve spring out there. Like, these things are huge. But it's because of the design. Since we have an integrated front block and an integrated LPR, essentially, this valve spring has to run all the way up to the LPR and still, be able to compress. So a lot of people, if you do get into messing with Trilogies, because they're fantastic, fantastic bodies to work with, if you want to try, some body modifications, you want to try chopping something up, you need something to carve on, or honestly, if you just want to shoot them, they still make really good cockers. But when you get into messing with spring applications, you can use, for example, spider hammer springs as Trilogy valve springs in differing tensions. Now, the hammer springs are a standard cocker hammer spring. One other thing that is worth mentioning about the Trilogy series, at least on the Trilogy Sports, you'll notice, if we get up here close, that feed neck is actually cast into the body. Okay, this is not a stub that's pressed in like on most 2K cockers. It's not threaded, nothing like that. Now that is for the Trilogy Sport models. So most people, when they feed neck modify these, they will hack that off right there, middle everything down, and then actually tap the body itself for a threaded feed neck. Now it's worth mentioning that a lot of the other bodies, especially I think it was just the Select Fire bodies, came with a threaded feed neck or an STO threaded feed neck, so you could swap them out to a clamping feed neck pretty simply. But all in all, that's your basic rundown on the differences between Trilogies and a standard autococker. Like I said, these are fantastic markers. You can pick them up super cheap. There's a lot of messing around that you can do with them. There's a lot of stuff that you can modify on them, just like a standard cocker. There are also parts available, such as, I believe it's Palmer's Pursuit Shop makes an adjustable Trilogy rock, or a rock LPR that threads directly into where your standard Trilogy LPR would be. There's also, you can get adapter nuts that will thread into where the standard LPR would thread and turns it into a 1/8 NPT input, so you can use any LPR on it that you want. There's lots of stuff you can do with these. I've built some crazy stuff with these as well. They're a lot of fun to mess with, so don't let it deter you from picking one up just because it's a $100 cocker. Pick it up, have some fun with it. They're really good to practice on because it removes some of the equation of what you're messing with the timing equation anyway. It pulls a variable out so you don't have to mess with it as much. And like I said, they're one of those ones that because they are a little bit simplified, we all know that any cocker that's set up correctly is just a pull out and shoot kind of marker, but these ones took that a step further and tried to make them idiot proof. Now, we do have some special, super idiots, but that's your basic rundown on them. They're great guns to pick up and play with, just for modifying for pretty much anything. Just go out and shoot them. Great starter autococker. If there's anything I didn't cover very well or anything else you guys want to talk about, hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight into what you're messing with when it comes to trilogies. So thanks. We'll talk to you next time, guys.